The foreclosure notice flapped violently against the rusted garage door as the afternoon wind pushed dust across the empty street. Inside that tiny garage, under a leaking tin roof and beside shelves filled with broken machine parts, Rowan Hale sat on an overturned paint bucket with his 7-year-old son asleep against his shoulder. The smell of engine oil mixed with rainwater and hopelessness. Outside, black luxury cars lined the curb like predators waiting for the final breath of something weak. And standing beside them was the billionaire CEO who had just destroyed the only future Rowan had left. The CEO smiled while the locks were changed. Rowan did not cry. Not because he was strong, but because life had already taken everything tears could ask for. Before we begin this emotional journey, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Wisdom Story House, if you believe kindness and second chances can still change lives. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the people the world throws away become the ones who build something unforgettable. The city of Belridge looked beautiful during the daytime. Glass towers reflected sunlight like diamonds, cafes overflowed with busy people chasing promotions and deadlines, and expensive billboards promised luxury, success, and power. But hidden far from downtown, beyond the polished offices and crowded highways, stood Rowan's tiny garage squeezed between abandoned warehouses and cracked sidewalks. Most people never noticed it. The sign above the entrance was faded and crooked, and half the letters had fallen off years ago. But to Rowan, that garage was sacred ground. It was where he had worked with his late father. It was where he had spent countless nights rebuilding engines while his son Noah colored pictures beside him. It was the last thing in his life that still carried warmth. 3 years earlier, Rowan's wife Clara had died from a sudden illness that consumed their savings faster than he could earn money. The hospital bills crushed him. The funeral nearly destroyed him. But the silence afterward was what truly broke him. Every morning afterward felt heavier than the last. He woke up exhausted, worked until his hands bled, and returned home trying to pretend everything was okay for Noah. Some nights he would sit on the kitchen floor long after midnight staring at unpaid bills while Noah slept beside him on the couch because the boy hated sleeping alone after losing his mother. Still, Rowan kept going. Because fathers do not always get the luxury of falling apart. The garage barely survived month to month, but Rowan had something the large corporations lacked. People trusted him. He remembered names, listened to stories, repaired cars honestly, and never overcharged struggling families. Teachers, delivery drivers, widows, and exhausted workers all came to him because he treated them like human beings instead of invoices. Unfortunately, kindness rarely impresses billionaires. When Titan Automotive announced plans to build a massive technology center in Belridge, the city celebrated. The company's CEO, Victor Barron, was worshipped like a modern king. Sharp suits, magazine covers, private helicopters, and speeches about innovation made him untouchable in the eyes of the public. But behind the cameras was a ruthless businessman obsessed with expansion. The abandoned district where Rowan's garage stood had become valuable overnight. Titan wanted every building demolished to make room for luxury commercial property. Everyone sold. Everyone except Rowan. At first, the offers were polite. Then they became aggressive. Finally, they became threatening. Rowan refused every check because selling the garage meant erasing the final piece of his father's memory. Victor Barron did not understand emotional attachment. To him, every square foot had a price. One bright afternoon, Victor arrived personally. His expensive shoes stepped carefully over puddles while photographers followed him around like insects chasing light. Rowan stood beneath the garage doorway wiping grease from his hands as Noah watched nervously from inside. Victor offered him one final contract. Rowan refused again. The CEO's expression changed instantly. The warmth disappeared from his face like sunlight vanishing behind storm clouds. Within weeks, inspections began. Permits suddenly became invalid. Fines appeared from nowhere. Suppliers stopped answering calls. Utility companies delayed services. Customers found the road mysteriously blocked during business hours. Rowan understood exactly what was happening. A giant was crushing him slowly. Then came the final blow. The city condemned the property over safety violations. Rowan had 36 hours to leave. On the final morning, he packed tools into an old truck while Noah sat quietly holding a small framed photograph of Clara. Neighbors watched helplessly from across the street. Some cried. Others looked away because witnessing someone lose everything felt unbearable in daylight. Victor's black car rolled past just before noon. He did not even look at Rowan. To powerful people, destruction becomes ordinary. That night, Rowan parked his truck beside an abandoned textile factory near the edge of town. Rain hammered the cracked windows while Noah slept curled beneath a blanket in the passenger seat. Rowan stared at the enormous dark building ahead. Broken windows lined the upper floors like empty eyes. Rust covered the walls. Wild weeds climbed through collapsed fences. The factory had been abandoned for nearly 20 years after a fire destroyed the business inside. Most people saw ruin. Rowan saw shelter. The next morning, sunlight spilled through shattered windows as Rowan pushed open the giant factory doors. Dust floated through the air like ghosts waking from sleep. The place smelled of rust, ash, and forgotten dreams. But there was space. Enough space to work. Enough space to survive. So he began again. He cleaned one corner first. Then another. He repaired electrical lines using salvaged materials. He built makeshift workbenches from broken pallets. During the day he repaired engines under beams of golden sunlight pouring through the broken ceiling. At night he tucked Noah into a sleeping bag inside a tiny office upstairs and told stories until the boy fell asleep. Months passed. Winter arrived early that year. Bitter winds slipped through cracks in the factory walls, freezing Rowan's hands while he worked. Some mornings he could barely feel his fingers. Yet customers slowly returned. One customer became 5. 5 became 20. Word spread across Belridge about the mechanic working miracles from an abandoned factory. People came because Rowan was honest. But they stayed because he gave them hope. A struggling single mother arrived one morning unable to afford repairs for her delivery van. Rowan fixed it for free. An elderly man whose car broke down before visiting his wife's grave found Rowan waiting after midnight to help him. A young apprentice named Matteo wandered into the factory searching for work after aging out of foster care. Rowan hired him immediately despite barely having enough money himself. Without realizing it, Rowan was building more than a business. He was building a family. The old factory slowly transformed during the daytime. Sunlight reflected off newly cleaned floors. Machines hummed where silence once lived. Coffee brewed in the mornings while workers laughed together beside toolboxes. Noah rode a bicycle through empty hallways after school while employees cheered him on. For the first time since Clara's death, Rowan sometimes smiled without forcing it. Then something unexpected happened. A video appeared online. A customer had secretly filmed Rowan helping a stranded elderly woman during a snowstorm. The clip showed him kneeling in freezing slush repairing her car while Noah held a flashlight beside him. Millions watched within days. Comments flooded social media calling Rowan the mechanic with a heart. Donations poured in. Volunteers arrived offering labor, equipment, and support. The abandoned factory became a symbol. And symbols are dangerous to men built on ego. Victor Barron noticed. At first, he laughed at the attention. But when major media outlets began comparing Titan Automotive's greed to Rowan's compassion, Victor's image suffered publicly. Investors questioned his decisions. Employees criticized company culture. Belridge citizens started protesting corporate land seizures. For the first time in years, Victor Barron felt threatened. So he decided to destroy Rowan completely. Titan Automotive filed lawsuits claiming Rowan violated industrial regulations inside the old factory. Inspectors arrived weekly. Banks suddenly denied Rowan business loans. Insurance companies cancelled contracts overnight. Stress consumed him again. Sleep disappeared. Noah noticed the dark circles under his father's eyes returning. One evening, after everyone left, Rowan sat alone in the massive factory staring at unpaid legal documents scattered across his desk. Outside, golden sunset light stretched through dusty windows while machinery stood silent around him. He looked exhausted beyond words. Then Noah walked quietly into the office carrying a small cardboard box. Inside were hundreds of handwritten notes. Customers, workers, and strangers had been leaving letters for months. Thank you for fixing my ambulance for free. You gave my son his first job. You repaired my car so I could keep custody of my children. You reminded me good people still exist. Rowan read each note slowly while tears finally rolled down his face. Not tears of defeat. Tears of understanding. He realized the factory was no longer just his burden to carry alone. The community stood beside him. Within days, thousands gathered outside the factory in support. Construction workers volunteered repairs. Lawyers offered free legal defense. Local restaurants delivered food to employees. Teachers organized fundraising events. Mechanics from neighboring cities arrived asking to work for Rowan. The movement became unstoppable. News stations covered the story nationwide. During interviews, Rowan never insulted Victor. He never sought revenge. He simply spoke about dignity, hard work, and helping people who had nowhere else to go. His humility made people love him even more. Eventually, investors approached Rowan with offers to expand. But unlike Victor Barron, Rowan built differently. He converted abandoned buildings into affordable repair centers that trained unemployed workers and struggling parents. He offered apprenticeships to former inmates, foster children, and veterans. He created daycare areas inside workplaces so single parents could work without fear. Every new location carried the same message painted across the entrance walls. No one gets left behind here. Years passed. The old factory transformed into the headquarters of Hale Industries, one of the fastest-growing ethical manufacturing companies in the country. The same building once filled with ashes and silence now buzzed with life every single day. Thousands found employment there. Families survived because of it. Entire neighborhoods recovered because one broken man refused to surrender when life cornered him. And Victor Barron? Titan Automotive collapsed slowly under scandals, lawsuits, and public distrust. Investors abandoned him. Board members forced him out. The empire he built through intimidation eventually crumbled beneath its own cruelty. One cold afternoon years later, Victor quietly visited the old factory alone. No cameras. No bodyguards. No luxury cars. He stood outside the massive entrance watching workers laugh during lunch breaks while sunlight poured across the courtyard. Children played near community gardens built where rusted debris once covered the ground. Then he saw Rowan walking toward him. Older now. Stronger somehow. Peaceful. Victor looked around at the thriving empire and asked the question that had haunted him for years. How did you build all this after losing everything? Rowan glanced toward the workers, the families, the repaired buildings glowing under the afternoon sun. Then he answered softly. Because when people are shown kindness during their darkest days, they never forget it. Victor lowered his eyes. For the first time in his life, he understood the difference between power and legacy. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Stories like these remind us that compassion can outlive money, titles, and even failure itself. And before this story ends, comment below with one word that describes what kindness means to you. As evening settled over Belridge, golden light streamed through the giant factory windows while Noah, now grown taller, stood beside his father overlooking the city skyline. The same city that once ignored them now carried Rowan Hale's name with respect. Workers waved goodbye while laughter echoed through the courtyard below. Somewhere deep inside that enormous building, machines continued humming like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Years earlier, a billionaire had shut down one small garage believing he was ending a poor man's future. Instead, he accidentally created an empire built from compassion, sacrifice, and second chances. And in the end, the world remembered not the man who destroyed lives for profit, but the father who rebuilt hope from ruins.